A lot of people want a traditional marriage in this new dating, or whatever you want to call it, but there's no traditional marriage examples out there anymore, you know. And what I mean by that is, when I was raised, like, I saw my grandmother and my mom, like, they were at the house every day, cooking, cleaning, washing clothes, talking on the phone all day. My dad, everybody did their thing. That's what I saw, that's what I know. But I also have a best friend. Her mom, we grew up together. Her mom never was married, always had a boyfriend here and there. And we are like night and day. You know what I'm saying? I'm always thinking about, cooking for a guy, and she always thinking about what she gonna order and he can have some of her food. Like, the thought process is different. But she's used to just looking out for herself and looking out for her daughter, because that's what her mom did. And me, I'm just naturally a domesticated type of person. So I think right now, this new generation, they don't have that anymore, because it's not existing anymore. It's not being, represented anymore. Now, side chicks and side dudes and all that's being more represented, but the verbiage still comes out of a man and a woman's mouth. They want a traditional marriage. They want gender roles. But the reality is, it's just not there anymore.
Oh,
To add to what you just
I would
said,
have to challenge that and say that that it is. I think that it just varies, just how you said. If you went to your grandparents' house versus the friend's mother's house, these are two different people that are living life completely differently. There's plenty of platforms uh, of men and women that are married, and they have a traditional style of marriage. It's just all about, and I was speaking on this yesterday. It's all about the diet that you're intaking. What information are you intaking? What type of people are you surrounded around? Because there are absolutely married couples that are having successful relationships that's lasting 20, 30, 40 years. The only problem is that to this newer generation that we're living in, it's not sexy. It's not sexy to submit to your husband or to your wife. It's not sexy to work and go through the struggles of marriage, of choosing each other every single day. It's not sexy to do that. It's sexy to go outside and be promiscuous, to show your body, to flash money, to attract and want hoes and all of this other shit. That's sexy right now. But there's another group of people that's not sexy to. So it's really all about the old saying of birds of a feather flock together. So if you're surrounding yourself around people that aren't interested in that, then absolutely you're not going to see it, and you're not going to be attracted to it. You're not going to want it. But if you're surrounded around people that are an example of that lifestyle, then that's what you're gonna that's what you're gonna reflect.
I think what you just said, a little bit, in a way, it was kind of contradictory, right? Because you said, well, there's traditional marriage, but then all the things that you described about things not being sexy anymore is essentially describing that we don't live in a traditional world. On top of that, I want to add this, like, what you may be describing, what you're describing probably as a traditional marriage isn't even traditional, probably. And that's how far we've gotten from traditional marriages. Like, for example, I hear a lot of women say, oh, the men used to pay all the bills, the men used to provide. The men were also the only ones who could get jobs at one point. They weren't competing in the marketplace with women. I hear the men say, and then at the same time, the same women that are saying that, they're not virgins. They drink alcohol. They have jobs. So it's like, marriage was created at a time where only men worked, women were virgins, they were given in marriage by their fathers who were home and present. Women are giving themselves in marriage today. There are so many weddings that happen where there's no father even walking the daughter down the aisle. But then we're making this the point that marriage is somehow still traditional. There's nothing traditional about that. And what we're doing is we're it's kind of like a little fixer upper. Like we're constantly slapping on new things to marriage to adjust it and make it work to the world that it's in now. But if you were to take the average marriage today and present it to the people in the past when marriage was more traditional, they would even consider those marriages to be horrible. They would look at these marriages like, what? Your wife is disrespecting you. Your husband is a bum. Like there would be so many their standards then were entirely different than the standards now, simply because of the society we live in. So I do understand your point, though. I think it is true, though, that there are a lot of people who don't want to put in necessarily the work or the dedication that comes with marriage. But I also think what's being overlooked is that we live in a world where they don't have to. People in the past were shamed if they weren't married. They were getting married to have sex. I mean, even in the Bible, Paul says it's better to marry than to, I mean, better to stay single as I do. But if basically better to marry than to burn. People in that time were marrying because they could not openly engage sexually with the opposite sex unless they were married. They would be stoned to death. They would be, hung in the public square. They would be called heretics. That's not the generation we live in anymore. We live in a generation where people can have sex with whom and whatever they want now. I made a joke in the chat earlier about when they were talking about women being satisfied, and I said my joke was like, yo, you can go buy any size and shape dick you want at the store. At the end of the day, that's the world we live in. We live in the world where during the pandemic, the number one product that was for sale on Amazon that they were shipping was dildos and vibrators. So we're not living in a world where people need to get married to be able to have a relationship, to be able to there were people who got married just to be able to go out on dates privately. You remember, there was traditional marriage. You didn't even date alone. You dated in groups. Your parents had to get to know this person. That's not the world we're living in now. So if we really want to talk about traditional marriage, we have to take it all the way traditional, because anything that's not that is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that new age stuff. Like, we're living in a whole different world. And again, we're trying to piece it all together and make something work. But it's like we're living in a different world. And I say this all the time. I think what it is that I think there's a process called destroy and rebuild. I personally believe that people are too attached to the idea of marriage as it stood. And there needs to be a process societally of rebuilding what the idea of marriage is in general, because it has to be restructured to be able to apply to the world that we're currently living in. Or if not, it's going to continue to fail. And if we're being honest, it's failing. Most marriages end. More than 50% of them end in divorce. The ones that don't end in divorce, those people aren't necessarily happy. Those you have abuse, you have all type of stuff going on where even if they're sticking together for 30, 40 years, that doesn't mean that it's a success. So I'm gonna land there.